Hello, everyone. Everyone at the moment being Anjali. We're live. That's right. All right, so now I'm going to, can I invite Anjali? That would be my dream come true, truly. Interact. Nope. Lighting Q&A. Lightning Q&A. Randomly choose topics to discuss. That's kind of interesting. Poll. We have to experiment with those things for sure. Hello, user. We are talking about psychology and hypnosis. And if you have any questions about anything like that, certainly feel free to let me know. Hello, Ed. Let's see. So we've got guests and hosts. So I'm going to click on, so no guest requests yet. Hosts. What does that button do? Suggested hosts. I don't know if someone is able to be both a guest and a host at the same time. Hey, Zach, how you doing? We are answering questions about hypnosis, psychology, how the brain works, personal improvement, making more money, quitting smoking, alleviating drinking or cutting down drinking, working out, losing weight. We're talking about all those topics. Specifically how psychology affects how we perform our best in life. Let's see. So I'm trying to invite. Can I invite? Oh, I can invite Anjali, my moderator, should she wish to join. She's got so many good questions. Okay, so thank you all so much for joining. So we're talking about the brain, we're talking about psychology, we're talking about hypnosis. We're talking about the pharmaceutical and medical industries, if we wish. So if you have any questions about the brain, psychology, hypnosis, anything about improving your life, certainly feel free to ask. I will keep my invite other host and go live together. Fascinating. So here's one of my sort of basic premises that I talk about. So most people, when they're trying to make personal changes, maybe they're trying to quit smoking, maybe they're trying to lose weight, maybe they're trying to make more money, maybe they're trying to just improve their life. First of all, most people aren't even trying to improve their life. They're just trying to get along. But the 1%, the 1% of us who actually, that's right, Jesus lives and spread the good word. I agree with you 100%. So there are a small portion of people, and I'm hoping to find them in my chat, that actually do want to improve, not just get along, not just be mediocre, but actually improve yourself in every way. One of the most interesting topics is there are only 3 things that everyone cares about. There's only 3. Everything else is just the logistics of running our life. So those 3 things are your health, that includes your mental and physical health. It includes your money, that includes career, education, finances, investments. And the third thing is relationships, personal relationships, family, friends, romantic relationships. So that's it. Those are the only 3 things that anyone cares about. Well, what about putting gas in my car? Well, we don't really care about that. That's just the logistics of improving the other 3 areas of your life. So this channel is essentially about, okay, so how can we take those 3 areas, money, relationships, and health, and improve those? So let me give you this idea. So what if I were to tell you that, hey, Bob, Morningstar, what if I were to tell you, Felix the cat, did I get a question? Am I from another planet? Aren't we all? Let's see. So, yeah, if you have any questions about the brain, psychology, hypnosis, let me know, and I'll be happy to answer. So, here, what if I were to tell you that there is a formula for systematically increasing your happiness? Ridiculous, right? Okay, so let me give you this key principle. The key principle is that we've only got those 3 areas of our life that are important to you: health, money, relationships. And yes, thank you very much, Anjali. So Now, here's the thing. Here's the key principle. You will only, so let's just say you were to rate each of those three areas of your life. Do this as a little experiment right now. So think, okay, relationships, money, health. On a scale of 1 to 10, how good are those doing? 1 is terrible, 10 is perfect. So, okay, my health is, what is it between 1 and 10? My relationships between 1 and 10. My money between 1 and 10. Here's the thing. You will only be as happy as your lowest number. You could be like 10 health, 10 money, be the richest person in the world, be perfectly healthy. But if your relationships are all terrible, then you are not going to be happy. You're going to go down to your lowest number. So if you're a 10, 10, 2, you're only going to be at 2 happy. So here's the principle. The principle is you always want to work on your lowest number. So let's say I wake up in the morning and I say, well, let's say, I've got all the money I need, I've got great relationships, but my health is declining because I'm overweight, I smoke, I drink, and I could, pass away at any time. So the only way, in that particular instance, the only way that you're going to be happier is by improving your health. So what that means is that if you make more money or make more relationships, you're just not going to get any happier. Your brain will not get happier. So what that means is that you have to spend every little bit of your energy that day improving your health in some way. So it could be, okay, well, let me join a gym. Let me see what I can do to eat healthier. Let me work on maybe it's mental health. Maybe I need to reduce my stress or anxiety. Maybe I've got, maybe it could be like a lot of people, they might say, oh, well, I have not very much money and my job is going terrible, but I do have good health. I don't have any health problems and I do have good relationships. In which case that might be, okay, so what can I do to create a side business? What can I do to improve my job in some way? What can I do to start making more money? And maybe I'll network with people that do know how to make money. The only way you're ever going to be happier is if you work on the lowest one at that time. So how long does it take to improve that area? It could be immediate. Let's just say that, for example, my money is going really well and my relationships are going really well, but I haven't worked out in a week, or I have been slipping off my diet. Well, that day I can be like, all right, listen, this is the thing holding me back. This is my roadblock. I need to right now make a plan for improving my diet, improve my workout schedule. And what will happen is that is the only way that you can directly increase how happy you are. Humpty, thanks for joining. Felix, thanks for joining. Good to see everybody. Jason, good to see you. Okay, so most people, whenever they're trying to meet a goal, they will succeed only for a short time or fail immediately when attempting to make personal changes. And it doesn't matter if it's losing weight, quitting smoking, getting motivated to do something, or otherwise improving yourself. Most people simply do not change effectively. Darren, how you doing? Yes, Angela, you're absolutely right. Liz, how you doing? And here's the reason. The reason most people don't effectively change is because society does not want you to change. And the way they teach us to change is completely opposite from what actually works effectively. And one of the reasons for that is back in the very early 1900s, I think 1901, John Rockefeller, who essentially created the modern educational system, like public schools as we know it, he said, and one of his most famous quotes is, we don't need a world of thinkers. We need a world of workers. We already have enough thinkers. He said this. And he's the one primarily responsible for creating the modern public education system. And then certain people he was working with still own McGraw-Hill, which creates 90% of our public school textbooks. So school teaches, which everyone's required to go to by law, school trains us for at least 12 years to be workers and not thinkers. Just keep doing whatever you're doing. And so when people try to do things like, oh, well, you know what? I need to improve myself. I need to quit smoking. I need to stop drinking so much. I need to get to a healthier lifestyle. I need to start opening a side business. I need to start working on my relationships. I need to know how to I need to feel more comfortable and confident socializing with people. And what happens is they're completely unequipped to do that. Our educational system does not equip you to make any kind of positive personal changes. Hey, Dawn, how you doing? Thanks for joining. So society, and here's the thing, society does not have any incentive to help the individual change. Hey, Mark, how you doing? By the way, everyone who just joined, any questions you have about hypnosis, psychology, how to make improvements, feel free to ask any questions. I'll do my best to answer. So society does not have any kind of, hi, me, how you doing? Society does not have any incentive to help the individual change. The fact is that industries, the medical industry, the weight loss industry, the pharmaceutical industry, every industry makes more money off of you when you are sick, fat, and crazy than it does when you're healthy. They want to hold you down because they make more money that way. So if you've got someone who is a customer, like a pharmaceutical customer, for example, you can either create a medicine that will cure them and they won't need you anymore, or you can create a pill that will maybe temporarily alleviate the symptoms, but keep the problem or even possibly make the problem worse. So, and of course, you're going to make more money if you do that latter one. So you cannot rely on society to try to make you healthier. And they're not going to teach you that either. So the unfortunate fact is the vast majority of people will never acquire the skills they need to actually improve their life. But those tools do exist. You actually can improve your life, but society is not going to give those tools. You have to find them elsewhere. Let's see. So yes, Anjali, starting your own business, generally frowned upon or discouraged. Like, oh, you couldn't do that. You have to like hire people and you have to like do taxes a different way. You have to do a corporation thing, and it's also confusing. You don't want to do that. You just want to, work for a company, let them take care of everything. You just got to show up, do your job, then you can go home. That's what they want you to think. That is what school trains us to do. And one of the kind of funny things, hey, Barry, how you doing? One of the kind of funny things is that not only does society greatly benefit from you being sick, crazy, and unhealthy, but we actually, like a society actually does need mostly workers. Like if you can think of it as like a pyramid, you don't need everyone to be a thinker. And one of the interesting things, especially about American culture, is that we're all taught to be, like by society, we're taught that being an individual is the only way you're actually going to be of value. Hi, D, artist. What kind of art do you do? So we're taught by society that, if you don't have, like we're taught to be individuals, but then school trains us to not be an individual. So there's a lot of depressed people thinking, oh, I'm just like everyone else. I'm not as special as I thought I was. So you're depressed, you're ineffective, you have all these problems. You have to rely on the pharmaceutical industry to try to prop you up for a little while. And that's where most people are. Most people are in the position of being completely and totally unequipped to do anything effective whatsoever. So what do we do about that? So, and the answer is you have to learn to take control of your own brain and how you think so that you can open that up, so that you can become healthier effectively, so that you can gain money effectively, which is very possible, so that you can improve your relationships vastly. If you have the right skills, all three of those things are relatively easy. Like you can be a healthy person if you have the right skills, but mentally and physically. You can be the kind of person that everyone likes to be around and actually create lasting relationships easily if you have the skills to do that. That's just a skill set. And you can make money easily if you know the ins and outs of doing that, but school will never teach you that. Public school will never, ever teach those three things because those are the only three things that make you happy. They're the three things that make you happy, and they're the three things that very specifically they avoid teaching you. And you would think a lot of people say like, oh, well, school doesn't teach us how to do taxes and stuff like that. That's just the tip of the iceberg. That would be useful to learn how to do taxes and what loan is and what loans are and how interest works and stuff like that. But that would, even if we knew that, our lives would be a little easier because we would actually know how to do that stuff. sure, the economy would completely collapse because it relies on the vast majority of people not understanding how debt and interest work. And so the vast majority of people are squeezed between having to pay debts, having to pay rent, not even mortgage anymore. Now it's just all about rent and debt, and seeing, like, just trying to get some food on the table. And that's where they want you. They want you there for the rest of your life. Do not let them fool you. They want you there for the rest of your life. And if you don't have the skills to break free from that, you never will. The vast majority of people never break free from that. And that is exactly why the schools don't tell us that. All right, so let's see. So D, I've been trying out oil painting. Amazing, the hardest one right away. I like that. Like, most people start off with, like watercolors or something like that. Oil painting, the most expensive and most difficult one. That's exactly probably what I would start with as well. All right, so Anjali asked, if you fix all those elements and have a setback in mindset, then what? Okay, so that's a good question. So how about this? Let's just say that you're cooking, okay? And then you're baking a cake. And let's just say that you want to bake cakes for a living. And let's say one day, like on your 7th cake, like you're doing pretty well, and your 7th cake, and you burn your 7th cake. Oh, you forgot, it's in the oven too long, it got burned. Is that a setback, or is that an opportunity to learn? Now, neither one of those is true. It could be a setback, or it could be an opportunity to learn. Neither one of those is true or false. Neither one is right or wrong, and neither one is even good or bad. It just leads to a different result. So if you make the decision that you are, now by default, most people would just be like, oh, that's terrible, that's bad, and they would feel bad about it. But if you make the decision that you're going to use that as a way to grow and become better, then you absolutely will do that. Your brain 100% has the capacity to do that. Okay, yep. Okay, good. So you didn't start with oil paint. That's good. You had said you were starting out, so that was my assumption. Let's see. Thank you all very much for joining. Quita, thank you for the follow. Fail forward. That's right. Exactly. Fail forward. If you're going to fail, and you are going to fail, you can either fail forward or backward. Like, you're not going to fail downward. So you can make the choice. You have to make the choice to fail forward if you want to move forward. Brent, thanks for joining. By the way, if anybody has a question about hypnosis, psychology, self-improvement, making any kind of personal change, I will do my best to answer. Okay, so to continue, society has no incentive to help the individual change. Industries generate more revenue from you having problems than from you being healthy. So the traditional focus into which we are indoctrinated by schools, for example, will not be our ally moving forward. So compare this to like a toaster. If a toaster has a broken part, you just replace the toaster. That's not how personal problems are. You actually there's something that you can do about a problem that you yourself created. So from now on, if you were to, imagine for a second that you were to think about all of your problems as being problems that you yourself at least partly created. Some people would not want to do that, but the power is if you say, okay, if you come with a mindset of, okay, I created these problems, that also means I have the power to change those problems. So, okay, so, let's just say that, somebody's overweight and they want to lose weight. They could think, oh, well, it's my genetics, it's how I grew up. But every single time they think that, it makes it less likely they're going to solve the problem. Every problem that you have right now, every single problem you have right now is between 1 and 99% your fault. 1 and 99%, everything. Like, there's nothing that is 0% your fault, and there's nothing that's 100% your fault. So you have a choice. You can either blame whatever part of it is not your fault, or you can say, okay, well, this percentage of it is my fault. What can I do about that? And when you take that attitude, suddenly things start coming together for you. Suddenly you start making improvements. Suddenly your brain starts producing confidence. Suddenly you have less anxiety because your brain feels like it's more in control. ASDF, thanks for joining. What about outside influences? Friends, family, coworkers. So I'm guessing what you're asking is, how much do they influence you? And really, I guess the question is how much you want them to influence you. How much do you allow them to influence you? If you, the best way to handle that is have kind of a filter so that if they're saying something, when somebody tells me something, they're like, let's say somebody said, oh, hey, that's an ugly shirt. Okay, so the way I try to think about that is, okay, so Scott Adams, who was the author of Dilbert, the Dilbert, he was actually a brilliant philosopher. Most people don't know that. He wrote a book and on like his philosophies about life and everything. And one of the things he said is that um, unsolicited criticism is always more valuable than solicited criticism. So if I went to my wife and I said, "Oh, hey, what does my shirt look like?" or "How's my shirt look?" She'd be like, "Oh yeah, it looks great. It looks good on you," and I appreciate and love her for that. But if somebody else says, "You know what? That's an ugly shirt. That doesn't like match your the curtains behind." So I'm not going to take that emotionally. I'm going to say, okay, so is that true? Like, okay, it does kind of maybe, does it match? It makes it a little bit hard to see there. So I might say, okay, well, maybe next time I'll wear a blue shirt. Okay, or maybe I examine that and I say, okay, well, I don't see any problem with that, so I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. Either way, I'm not going to take that emotionally. So, and on the other hand, they might say something positive, in which case you can take that emotionally if you want to, and that might help you psychologically. So hopefully that answered the question. You've got to like intelligently intercept and interpret advice and things that the outside world is telling you. Okay, so back to kind of the topic I was talking about. So in order to understand how the brain processes information, you have to understand that there are three aspects to reality. Hey everyone, Turco, Gail, Viper, I think I saw that name. Thanks for joining. If you have any questions about psychology or hypnosis, let me know. I'll try to answer. So as far as every person is concerned, there are three aspects to reality. Hey, Paolo, how you doing? There's the outside world. There's you, the conscious mind, and there's your unconscious, which is your brain. So this is how a human being processes information. You get information from the outside world, you collect it with your senses, your five senses, and then you interpret it, you think about it. And then once you have an idea of what you're seeing and hearing from the outside world, you imagine it to your brain. So there's these three parts. There's the outside world, there's you, and there's your brain. You and your brain are also called your conscious and your unconscious. So here's why that's important. You can know one thing, but if you imagine something else, your brain will only be aware of what you imagined. For example, let's just say that I'm thinking about, opening a business. And intellectually, I was like, oh, I can do that. I have the steps. I've got a friend who's going to help me do it. Now, let's just say that once you get that information, you think about it, you start imagining negative things that'll happen. Like, oh, well, what if I fail? It's going to be too intimidating. What about this competition? And you start thinking that, what's going to happen is that imagination is all that your brain gets. And your brain thinks, oh, that's what opening a business is like? Well, that sounds pretty scary. Here, I'm going to give you some fear to protect you from that, to make sure you don't do it. All right, so what happened there? You got some facts that were good, but the way you thought about it was negative or anxiety producing, and then your brain only got that, so it just gave you anxiety. Does that mean there's something wrong with your brain? No, of course not. You gave your brain anxiety producing thinking, and then it produced anxiety. That doesn't mean your brain is broken. That means your brain is working perfectly. Okay, so another question. What is the difference between affirmations and positive thinking or self-hypnosis? Also, do you think hypnosis can ever be dangerous? Let me answer that one first because it's a little easier. And Anjali, I will absolutely come back to that question. So the short answer is no, hypnosis cannot ever be dangerous in any way. Now, hypnosis is very different than brainwashing. So just to give you a very clear idea of, like, this is not an opinion, this is kind of a known fact. So very briefly, there's something called Project MK Ultra, which has been declassified. You can look it up on Wikipedia if you want. And basically the government illegally studied from the 1950s to 1970s, what's the best way to influence people and basically like get them to talk and get them to do what we want. And they tried everything under the sun they tried. One of those things was hypnosis. So they had 20 years to try all this stuff. They tried hypnosis. And in the end, they concluded that we cannot use hypnosis. They kind of gave up on hypnosis because you can't make people do things they don't want to do. You can only help with hypnosis. So it was of no use to them. On the other hand, they found other ways of brainwashing, which I talked about last time. I could talk about again if people are interested in that. But basically, the CIA, after they're spending untold amounts of money and 20 years to try to use hypnosis for the forces of evil, gave up and decided that that could not be done. So to me, besides my personal experience, that is the best evidence that I know of that if a giant government organization with unlimited funds cannot use hypnosis for anything bad, then it can't be used for anything bad. So the short answer is no, hypnosis cannot ever be dangerous under any circumstances. Okay, so hopefully that was clear. Jack, thanks for joining. Bobby, thanks for joining. Great to see everyone. Okay, so last question was, what's the difference between affirmations and positive thinking or self-hypnosis? Okay, so there is a lot of overlap between those things. So affirmations are kind of like a pop culture term for just telling yourself something that is generally positive. So it's like, I'm going to sit down and say, oh, money is good. I attract money. It's like, it really is kind of like a pop psychology version of hypnotic suggestion. They can't be used for any bad purpose. Their effectiveness would vary widely. So I would just define affirmations as kind of a pop psychology version of hypnotic suggestions. Okay, so positive thinking. Again, there's some overlap there. Positive thinking, again, is kind of a pop psychology kind of phrase for imagining that things are going to go well. And again, I would say that in a pop psychology way, just barely skims the surface of how you can really use hypnotic suggestions. Now, hypnotic suggestion, so let me answer the self-hypnosis. Self-hypnosis, of course, is hypnosis on yourself. Hypnosis is a state in which your brain can receive suggestions much more effectively. So if you can get into that state and either give yourself suggestions or have someone else give you suggestions, those suggestions can be much more effective than if you're not in hypnosis. So hypnosis is basically an amplifier for suggestions, like a megaphone. So here's let me just look here. Hello, everyone. SW Grande, Martin, Noana, Simon, thanks for joining. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Okay, so now here's sort of the most interesting part. So the question again was the difference between affirmations, positive thinking, and self-hypnosis. So affirmations and positive thinking are just pop psychology terms that barely brush the surface of what you can do with suggestion. Suggestion is a systematic, scientific, technical way to most effectively create instructions for your unconscious mind. So it's like a hand and a glove. So the suggestion is the hand, where this is the actual instruction that we're going to send to your brain. Now, and it's, you can you make it perfectly, so it's very palatable to the brain, very easy for the brain to comprehend, very easy for the brain to allow it to be installed, and then it can start working right away. Hypnosis is kind of like the computer programming software that allows you to get into the program so that you can reprogram it. You can have a suggestion or an affirmation or positive thinking, but if you are not in a hypnotic state, it has to try to get through the sponge that is the conscious mind, and that makes it very difficult. It's a big, heavy filter for a suggestion to try to get through. Hypnosis is essentially the process of putting that conscious mind to sleep so suggestions can go right by the conscious and into the unconscious. So hopefully that is a good answer for what is the difference between affirmations, positive thinking, and self-hypnosis, and how they all work together. Okay, Michael, thank you very much for the follow. And then a different Michael, thank you for joining. Okay, so we're talking about hypnosis, psychology, the brain. Any questions that you have, feel free to ask, and I will do my best to answer. All right, so Anjali asked, stage hypnosis and hypnotism versus hypnotherapy. So hypnotism is basically the study of hypnosis. So and then hypnotherapy is just using hypnosis with therapy. So those are kind of the easy ones. So the real question is stage hypnosis versus hypnotherapy. So now here's the thing. Hey, William, thanks for joining. So stage hypnosis is not real hypnosis. Stage hypnosis is actually more of a magic show with a hypnosis theme. So stage hypnosis, where like you see an entertainer bring up a bunch of people, have them sit down, they're clucking like chickens, they're singing like Elvis, etc. Not real hypnosis. There's a lot of factors going on there, and I can go into as much detail as desired for that. Hey, Donna, thanks for joining. Stage hypnosis is really just based on group psychology factors and getting people to be willing to do whatever you tell them to do. Has nothing to do with hypnosis. Real hypnosis or hypnotherapy is, it looks completely different. It looks more like a meditation or progressive relaxation, but it's done in a very like technical, scientific way so that it actually works. Meditation in general does not have usually specific goals. It's usually about relaxation or releasing energy. It's not usually about when this happens, I'm going to respond differently. Hypnosis is much more technical and specific than meditation. Jonathan, user, thanks for joining. Okay, so, and by the way, for people that just got here, the real RJ Pepino, I love it. So if you have any questions, Richard Westwood, if you have any questions, feel free to ask about psychology, hypnosis, personal change. Okay, so hypnosis. Everyone has been in that state between sleep and wake. That's true. So everyone does go into hypnosis every single day. Probably the most common question is, can I be hypnotized? And the answer is actually not only can you be hypnotized, you actually are hypnotized every single day. Ship Doozy, thanks for joining. KK, thanks for joining. So whenever you wake up in the morning, you have that in-between state before you're fully awake, and that is hypnosis. That is a state where your unconscious mind is more open to suggestion. Also, whenever you're going to sleep at night, before you're quite asleep, you pass through hypnosis. Hypnosis is actually normally a transitional state between being asleep and being awake. Hypnosis is very generally the process of bringing you to that in-between state and allowing you to stay there long enough to give you suggestions. That I would say is probably the best definition of hypnosis. User, thanks for joining. If anybody has any questions about hypnosis, psychology, personal change, let me know and I'll try to answer. Okay, thank you all very much for your questions so far. Okay, so here's one of the interesting things. It did wonders for stage performance anxiety. Good, yeah, and stage performance and anxiety in general is actually what I do the most frequently. Okay, so in order to understand how the brain processes problems and solutions, one thing you have to understand is that there are three aspects to reality as far as everyone's concerned. Leanne, how you doing? Thanks for joining. There is the outside world, there's you, and there's your unconscious. So your unconscious is your brain. So you get information from the outside world, you gather it with your five senses, and then you interpret it. And then once you have an idea of what you're looking at and hearing, you imagine that information to your brain. This is important because you can know one thing, but imagine something else. So for example, let's say I want to open a business and I know it will be a good idea, but I imagine that it'll be scary. Well, then my brain is going to produce anxiety because I'm imagining that it's scary. And my brain does not know about the outside world. My brain only knows what I actually imagine. So what that means is that we have to take control of what we imagine, not just what we know. Most people just pay no attention to the imagination process between you and the unconscious mind. Anjali, I'm a completely different violinist now. Thanks to my sessions, life, career changing. That's excellent. I'm really, really glad to hear that. Dobbs, thanks for joining. Terry, snagging between meals, overeating. Terry, thanks for joining and following. User, thanks for joining. So let's talk about snacking between meals and overeating. So that is also one of the most common things that I work with. Weight loss, exercise, nutritional health. So there's basically 4 parts to losing weight. Let's say you want to lose weight. There's 4 parts you have to do. Number 1 is eating only when you're actually hungry. So, and almost everyone who's overweight has this problem, where instead of only eating when they're hungry, they eat when they're stressed or bored. Basically, your mental state can be either comfortable, overactive, or underactive. If it's overactive, I call that stressed. If it's underactive, I call that bored. So if you, and your brain's always trying, your unconscious is always trying to bring you back to comfortable. So if you're overactive or underactive, your brain's going to want to do something about that. Now, if you don't give your brain a solution and program it in the correct way, your brain will simply do whatever it thinks is best. Now, that could be eating. So for a lot of people, that is eating. Maybe they learned growing up that eating is what you do when you're stressed or bored. So you're a little stressed or bored, you don't have a plan B, so you think about eating and you eat. So that's very possible. The second thing that we usually work on is type of food. So, and here's a really interesting concept. So everyone, feel free to do this. Hey, Joe, how you doing? So try this. There's basically 2 ways you can think about what kind of food is your favorite. So if you say, what is your favorite food? There's only 2 ways you can process that information. One is imagine what the food tastes like in your mouth. The other way is what a food feels like. And if you, whichever one you do, you're going to think the other one is ridiculous. Like, who does that? Like, if you're used to imagining what a food tastes like when I say, what is your favorite food? And then I say, there's other people that think about what the food feels like. You're like, that's ridiculous. Those people don't exist. And likewise, if you're the kind of person who imagines what a food feels like, and I say, some people imagine they make decisions based on what the food tastes like. They'd be like, that's ridiculous. I can't believe people do that. So, but that is in fact the case. We just never talk about it. So if you are the kind of person that imagines what food tastes like in your mouth when you think about eating, your brain is going to say, oh, that's the most important thing. What the food tastes like is the most important thing. And then it's going to make decisions and give you motivation based on what a food tastes like. On the other hand, when you think about what a food feels like, it's got a much closer correlation with food that's good for you and the right amount of food. Because if you, and also whether you're actually hungry, because if you mess any of those 3 up, then you're going to feel less good. If you eat too much food, or if you eat when you're not hungry, or if you eat like very heavy or unhealthy food, you're going to feel less good. So the people who are focused on what a food feels like when they think about what their favorite food is are going to tend to be much healthier, and they're not usually going to have weight problems. So that's the second major factor. Third major factor is amount of food. Most people eat 2 to 3 times the amount they need simply because they're not paying attention to how hungry they are while they're eating. Most people rely on external factors, and our society teaches us to do that. So if you ever wonder, why are Americans overweight? And then meanwhile, in other countries like Japan, where they also have like similar foods, they're not overweight. Why is that? And here, I'm going to give you a possible reason for that. In America, we are very externally oriented. That means that we are taught to pay attention to what's going on in the outside world more than what's going on in the internal world. So if when we're eating, we tend to pay attention, oh, when's the plate clean? When's the food gone? When's everybody else done eating? And we don't pay attention to how we actually feel while we're eating. Meanwhile, if you were to pay attention to how you feel while you're eating, you would stop eating much sooner. And here's the reason. Here, let me go over this principle. You're going to love this principle. Your brain will not turn off the desire to eat until it notices that you're no longer hungry. Think about that for a second. Your brain will not turn off the desire to eat until it notices that physically you're no longer hungry. So you could be no longer hungry, but if your brain doesn't notice that, it won't turn off the desire to eat, and you'll just keep eating, and that's what everybody does. Most people eat 2 to 3 times the amount they actually need in order to feel even satisfied. So very frequently, I'm sure everyone can imagine a time that they're like, oh, I shouldn't have eaten that much. And 100% it's because they were not paying attention to how they feel. They were paying attention to external factors, TV, phone, how much food is left on the plate, etc. That's what we're taught to do in America. We're taught to be externally oriented. Whereas in Japan, for example, they're taught to be more internally oriented, thinking internally and being introspective. and that ends up, I'm not saying that's better in every single situation. There are some situations where you want to be externally oriented, but when it comes to food and health, then you're going to be better off being introspective. So anyway, thank you very much for those questions. Yep, emotionally eating tougher at certain times of the day. Yeah, and a lot of people do have more problems at night, for example. I actually think that the time of day factor when it comes to eating, like if you have a problem more at a certain time of the day, that usually has to do with your diet balance. So for example, what will happen is if your diet's a little unbalanced, and you'll tend to sugar crash later in the day. So for example, over the course of one meal, if you have a lot of fat and sugar, you'll sugar crash at the end of your meal. If you do that a little bit every meal over the course of the day, then you'll tend to sugar crash at the end of the night. So anytime you're talking about like a sugar crash or a certain time of day, you're usually, unless you have something else physical going on, you usually are talking about the response is usually to balance your diets better during the day, balance your meals better during the day. All right, user, thanks for joining. Ghostface, thanks for joining. Great questions, Anjali. Thank you so very much. Again, we're answering questions about psychology, hypnosis, personal improvement, anything along those lines. I'll be happy to try to answer. Okay, so one of the things we're talking about is, so we have you, the outside world, and the unconscious. You collect information through your senses from the outside world. You then imagine those facts to your brain. Your brain only knows what you imagine, so you can know one thing, but if you imagine something else, your brain will react only to what you imagine. Let's say dogs. Some people are afraid of dogs. You might know that someone's dog is safe, like, okay, it's my next door neighbor's dog, he's very friendly, I see him being friendly all the time. You might know that, but if you imagine that if you try to pet him, he's going to bite you, your brain will create fear. Not because there's something wrong with your brain, but because your brain works perfectly. So the solution is going to be in how you imagine. You have to take control of your imagination. That's the one thing most people don't know, and that is why they don't have control over how they feel. The biggest problem people make is that, so your brain thinks, feels, and behaves, and it does in that order. You don't behave anyway or do anything until you feel a certain way, and then you don't feel a certain way until you think a certain way. So what that means is your thoughts create your feelings, which in turn create your behaviors. Now, the problem is whenever somebody wants to change something, it's always a feeling or behavior, always. So the problem is if you try to change your feeling or behavior without changing the supporting thinking, it's never going to work. So for example, let's say you're afraid of dogs, and it's because you're imagining that a dog will bite you if you try to pet him, and then you tell yourself, well, I'm just going to go pet the dog, and I'm going to beat this fear by just going up and petting the dog. It's not going to work because you're still imagining the dog's going to bite you. You have to change what you imagine to yourself before you can solve any problem. Okay, let's see. So fear of missing out, a common fear now. What do you think about the phrase fear of missing out? Well, I think that's a common phrase or common feeling that everyone's had, especially now. I think as social media and stuff goes faster and opportunities happen faster, fear of missing out is a more popular feeling for that reason. Also, here's another thing. Everyone almost wants to communicate that they're more successful than they are. So you go on social media and people are saying how successful they are, when in fact they're exaggerating or just straight up lying most of the time. So then you look at all these things like, wow, all these people are so successful. Why am I not successful? I must have. And then you get a fear of missing out. So I would say that the response to if you have a fear of missing out, then what that means is you don't have a good assessment of your own life. You're like, okay, what are my best opportunities right now, and how am I taking advantage of them? That is the direct opposite of fear of missing out. What can I do today to take advantage of opportunities that I have? And most people don't do that. They're like, oh, well, maybe I'll do it tomorrow. Don't do that. If you want to get rid of a fear of missing out, then what you have to do is take advantage of all your opportunities you have right now. Because what's going to happen is even if, like, let's say you see someone else being successful creating music or something like that, you might have a fear of missing out about that. But if you actively look at, assess, and take advantage of all the opportunities that you have right now, even if it's not related to music, your brain will not have that fear of missing out. You'll be like, I'm doing everything I can, plus more. And that person's having successful music, great. That's awesome for them. I'm gonna do my stuff. All right, thank you very much for that question, Anjali. Okay, so we're talking about how your brain processes information. You get information, you imagine it differently. Your brain creates fear. So you have to take control of your imagination. So let me give you this example. Let's just say that you are in an experiment. Let's see, I've got about 16 more minutes, so feel free to ask any questions that you might have. Let's say that you're part of an experiment where you and a partner have to control a robot. Now, one person, you, are the observer, which means you can see the robot. And you can talk to your partner about what the robot's doing. Your partner is the controller. And the controller can control the robot, but cannot see it. So what that means is the controller has to rely on you to give her information about the robot, what the robot's doing. Let's further say that if anything happens to the robot, it also happens to you and the other person. And so it happens to both partners. So if the robot's arm gets cut off, your arm gets cut off and your partner's arm gets cut off. So it's super duper important for you guys to work together to keep this robot safe. Okay, so that's the experiment we're starting with. Now, so the key question is, does the controller, the other person, your partner, want to sabotage you? Of course not. Of course not. They want to work. They need your valuable input. Because remember, you can see the robot and the other person can control the robot. So you got to work together. Neither one of you wants anything bad to happen to the robot. So that's what a lot of people say, oh, my brain's trying to sabotage me. Your brain is not trying to sabotage you, trust me. The only problem that could happen between the observer and the controller is a communication problem. That's it. So the observer can get accurate information about what's going on with the robot. Let's say the robot has to pass certain challenges or certain dangers that will come. And the observer's like, okay, so some fire is coming right now, so you need to activate the anti-fire shield for 5 seconds. Okay, do you think the controller is going to try to sabotage you? Oh, this will be so funny. I'll leave the shield off and then we'll both get burned alive. Of course not. The person doesn't want to sabotage you. So your brain is also not sabotaging you. Your brain's not sabotaging you. Don't ever think that. Okay, so that's number one. The brain will never try to sabotage you. So what does the controller need? The controller needs information and instructions because that's the only thing that she needs and doesn't have. That's number one. Number two, she is reliant on and does not want to sabotage the observer because she needs that person's information so that she can protect the robot. Number three, and this is probably the most interesting one. So number three, the fewer instructions. So we're talking about the controller of the robot who can't see the robot but can control. The fewer instructions and less information she has, the more she's going to rely on her most familiar past behaviors. Okay, so let's just say that you're the observer, you're working with the controller, you're like, okay, so they're about to shoot fire, so you need to do like the fire shield. Okay, now we're doing water, so we need like the umbrella so we don't short circuit, and then all of a sudden, well, in fact, let's just say, okay, so there's gonna be fire, okay? All right, there's fire again, do the shield. Okay, there's fire again, do the shield. And then let's say that you stop giving instructions. First of all, the controller's gonna be very nervous, like, hey, hello, are you there? I need more instructions. We don't want to get burned alive. What's going on out there? So if the controller does not get instructions, what's she gonna do? She's gonna keep doing whatever she was doing before because that has kept her safe so far. It's like, okay, well, I better keep that fire shield up until I get further instructions. You never know if more fire is gonna come. So what that means is your brain is going to continue doing whatever it's done in the past if you don't give it new instructions. All right, so whatever you're doing right now, I'm overeating, I'm eating junk food, I'm not working out, I'm smoking cigarettes, I have these anxiety-producing thoughts in my mind, I've got fear of missing out, I've got whatever it is, all that stuff, your brain will continue doing it if you don't give it new instructions because it thinks It needs those for your survival. Okay? Whatever is going on in your life right now that you see as a disadvantage or something that's unhealthy, your brain thinks it needs for your survival. And it will not stop doing it. And it will fight tooth and nail to do it until you give it different instructions. And those instructions come from your imagination. And that imagination can be structured into suggestions and then delivered using hypnosis. That is what hypnosis is. Okay. So that's kind of the main point I wanted to make today. I'm going to be on for a few more minutes. If you have any questions about what your brain is doing, it's like the game. Keep talking, no one will explode. That's exactly what it's like. That is a super fun game. Basically, the idea is one person has a bomb, and the other person has the bomb instruction manual, and they can't see each other. So that is actually a really good example. So the instruction manual person has to communicate clearly to the bomb diffuser, or else the bomb will explode. So neither one want to sabotage each other. Like the instruction manual person wants to give good, clear instructions, and the person diffusing the bomb wants to understand those instructions and execute them correctly. So yes, it is very much like that game. Hey, AJ, how you doing? We're actually wrapping up, but if you have any questions about psychology, hypnosis, how the brain works, let me know, and I'll be more than happy to try to answer. So just to kind of summarize what we talked about today, society does not, we are trained in our society. Hi, Aunt Serena. Thanks for joining. Ace, thanks for joining. So just to summarize for today, number one is a society, our schooling system, for example, is designed for us to not think independently for ourselves. It doesn't want us making any personal changes. It just wants us to be regular, average workers. School is set up that way. Public school, which you're required to go to, is set up that way. And the default is for people to simply continue living their lives the way they're living and never make any personal changes. So the only way you can do that is by taking control of your own brain. You're not taught how to do that, but the knowledge does exist. And I see my job as being to educate people on how to do that to the best of my ability. And the first step of that is understanding that there's three aspects to reality: the outside world, yourself, and the unconscious. The only way that you can sort of reprogram how you think about the outside world and what you do and what you feel and how you behave is by using your imagination purposefully to program your unconscious mind to react the way you want it to. Your unconscious does not want to sabotage you. It relies on clear communication from you, your imagination, in order to for it to make those changes. Okay, so I think that's about it for today. So just to give you a little preview of what we're going to do tomorrow. I'm going to try to come on every day. So tomorrow we're going to talk about the conscious and unconscious relationship, how it works, what is your unconscious, how does it relate to you, the conscious mind. We're going to talk about why problems seem unsolvable. So, and like when you have a problem, if you have a problem in your life right now, you probably have the impression that it's unsolvable or very difficult to solve. Most likely, it's not difficult to solve if you do it the correct way. If I wanted to remove a tire from my car and I just tried to do it with my hands, I would probably fail, and it would probably seem very, very difficult, but not because it's actually difficult, but because I'm using the wrong tools or not using any tools at all. That's what most people run into when they are trying to solve their own problem. Hey, Frank, how you doing? You're very welcome, Anjali. Thank you so much for helping. We're going to talk about how what we're used to thinking seems true. Probably 99% of what we think during the day seems true to us simply because we're used to thinking it. So we're going to talk about that and challenge some of the things that people assume to be true. We're going to talk about psychiatric diagnoses, why they exist, what effect they have on people that have them, and why you should disregard them or not think so importantly of them. We're going to talk about the mistakes that most people make when they're trying to make any kind of personal change. We're going to talk about, so there's several mistakes people make, including something I call delay in momentum, something traditionally called negativity bias. That's basically a preview of next time. So thank you all so much. Lord Euronymous, thank you so much. Me Waters, thank you very much. All right, I'm going to go now. Good night to everyone. Thank you so very much. If you're interested in this, I've got a ton of videos. If you click on my profile, I've got a bunch of videos about this kind of stuff that goes into more detail. I try to post at least twice a day. I'm going to try to do live more often to answer questions. So, pterodactyl, 1, get your A up and go walk. 2, do not snack. 3, eat healthy. 4, no overeating. Generally, that seems like very good advice. And we can actually, if you want to join me tomorrow, or if you want to ask any comments in one of my videos, if you ask a video or a comment in one of my videos, I'll usually respond with a video. So if you want to, hey, thank you. I appreciate you. And I'd be more than happy to, I'm happy to talk about anything that the viewers want to talk about. So if you want to talk more about weight loss or exercise or food or anything like that, that's actually one of my main topics. I actually do have at least like 9 or 10 videos about that. And I'd be more than happy to answer questions live about that too. So anyway, got to go. Thank you all so much for joining. I really appreciate it. I had a great time, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.